speaking with organizations here in Aurora, they mentioned that they don't trust the university. And the big reason is because the university comes in, they've been in a program for 2 years, then they leave, and the program's not finished, the resources haven't been given, the goals haven't been met. And I think that speaks to the issue of trust, which is that, I think trust is consistency. And I think that even if you come in and you're doing just a little bit of work every year that's not substantial, gradually it builds to the point where it does yield something and you build the trust of the community. So yeah, I don't know. I see trust as consistency above all else.
Okay. And I say that we need a new paradigm in thinking for our indigenous nations with the science.
Can you say a little more what you have in mind?
Well, I know the science community is trying to include indigenous thinking, but I'm not clear how to say this. But the science community,
offend anyone. It's fine.
but the science community needs to get on.
Yeah.
Because
At our time,
I think this is our time.
Okay. I want to thank you all. It's very helpful. We appreciate your openness and willingness to meet with us. It's really, we appreciate it. So then you'll move to what?
This feels like speed dating.
Oh, right. It is.
Speed dating or like a
Yeah, it is kind of like speed dating.
Then, Liz, we stay here.
Yeah, you guys stay here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll come back
Okay.
after I walk them.
Okay, good.
Thank
Right.
you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're all amazing. I was just waiting for them to grab their stuff.
Thanks so much, James.
yeah.
Good.
Welcome.
And we'll see you in a bit.
Okay.
Thank you. I need to look more careful. So are we on the same question with the next group or not?
I think so, yeah. I think our question doesn't change.
Question
We just
stays the
get
same.
everyone's
Okay.
perspective and then.
Just to say hello, I'm here, being here with you. That's a
Hi.
I'm embarrassed to start with the wrong question. On the wrong page. It's okay. Do you want to start the next one then? We take turns. Yeah, might as well. Yes, same one, but then we'll just take turns. Now, were we supposed to have Zen on Zoom?
Yes.
I'm not sure.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I'm not sure. Liz would know.
Yeah.
I'm here. Can
The
you hear
last time we
me?
tried someone on Zoom, it just was very hard to have
Yeah.
them engaged.
We can't. I think she would expect to just listen in,
Yeah,
not like
okay.
engage because it's so hard.
Yeah, I'm not sure if she's.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah,
Just
it
let
is
you
very
know.
hard if you're not. Yeah, that's it. I will say the meetings we've had that are remote, it's just that much harder to keep full attention
It
on it
really
versus
is.
you're here, you're eye to
Yeah.
eye contact, you can have the occasional side.
And I wish we could talk longer. I mean, I know we can't, but a lot of the things, like I don't know how to answer because of course you don't have trust. And like, I'm not gonna say you should have trust in the government because that's
Yeah.
been proven time and time and again.
It's going back to, I guess, recent and long ago broken promises. So, but I mean, just think from their point of view, they had a Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, who was tribal and looking out for them, and then to go to an absolutely horrible administration that is
Yeah.
So that must just be an incredible threat to them. We
That's
can't say,
one person.
yeah, but
So-
it's a difference from someone who really would look out, and they brought her up, and then who knows what the next will be, but you can be almost guaranteed it will not be favorable to their interests.
And it's interesting that the whole DEI conversation and that like we've been here much longer.
Yeah.
We
So-
haven't made it up here.
Oh, so they.
Yeah,
So had he worked in Samoa that he brought it up several times?
It sounded like his background was both
Okay.
Hawaiian and Samoan.
Yeah, Elizabeth, can you hear
They
me?
were saying that the Secretary of the
Can you hear
Interior
me?
is American, Deb Haaland, to whatever is coming in now is going to be almost guaranteed to be the opposite in terms of looking out for tribal interests. Well, you.
Okay. thanks everyone for coming. We appreciate it. We're just going to start with very quick introductions so we all know who we are. And then we're just going to ask you a question and pick your brain in terms of what you'd like to share with us, right? Andy, would you like to start us off with intro?
Okay, so I'm Andy Dennenberg. I teach at the University of Washington in Seattle. I've been working in public health for a long time, and I also work with urban planning and built environment. And so it's kind of those interactions of what your world around you and how it interacts with health.
Thank you. Carissa?
Hi everyone, my name is Carissa from the Navajo Nation, and I'm a fourth-year PhD candidate on campus in human medical genetics.
Medical.
Genetics?
Oh.
Hi, I'm Jaylee. I am from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. I'm staff here at Cayenne, and I'm also an MPH student.
Look over on Pawnee and Choctaw and currently work at History Colorado.
I'm Fiala Kohak, citizen of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma, and I'm officially retired, but I lived and worked in Denver in the community for 43 plus years.
Wow. Thank you. Liz?
I'm Liz Boyle. I'm a senior program officer at the National Academy of Sciences. And I'm one of the staff on this project.
Yeah, and I'm Lima Haber. I'm an associate professor at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And all my work is around environmental health, air pollution, and climate change. Yes, thanks for being with us. We have a question for you. No formal structure to this. We just want to hear your thoughts. So let me ask, and we're still on the same question, correct?
Yes.
We were just it is, what makes your community more vulnerable to stressors, in your opinion? What are the things that make your community more vulnerable to stressors of any sort?
Well, if we're talking about Metro Denver, I think that was and various Native-led community organizations have really tried to address that, bringing together folks to strengthen individually and collectively. We're very rich. The last time I saw numbers, we thought we were more than 200 tribes represented in Metro Denver.
I think makes your community more vulnerable?
I'll speak from a more like rural standpoint. I think geographic isolation is something that really, can impact our community in a variety of ways. Even just seeking access to care, grocery stores, for instance, education, infrastructure. And so I think because of that, a lot of our people will resort to alcohol, drugs, substance abuse, which, there's not really much for our people to do when there's, when they're so isolated. So I think that the isolation factor really plays an impact in really allocating the resources for our community to effectively, create more infrastructure that is centered on empowering our people in culturally competent ways is very much needed.
You should run for president.
Just kidding.
Maybe broadly is representation. I mean, I think it's gotten better as I got older, but when I was a kid, like people would be like, "Oh, you're Native." I didn't know natives were still around. Like I had to live on reservations, teepees, like a lot of erasure around indigenous identities and like the way museums portray Native people. So like some museums, yes, thank you. Don't want to make it too
I have to change that. I just started going.
movies, but yeah, I think there's just still a broad way that natives can be seen.
What does that do though? Do you think like what harm comes out of that to make people again more like vulnerable to harm?
I think not being seen or
Oh,
feeling
makes
like you're
sense.
not being seen.
More stereotypes.
Mhm.
I'm basically going to reiterate what they're saying, because I do think that's a big part of it, is when I think those stressors come out, especially when you're a young person, but even unless you're fighting against what is a stereotype of who you are to be seen as who you are, knowing your culture is not what's being seen there, but just being seen as an individual of somebody who's unique within that human kind of nature of who your whole tribal people are, and not just like we only see your tribe as like this or you're only like this. But I might be an individual who wants to do these things that would quote quote not be traditional or want to do this. And yet, if we really understood the tribal cultures, they were always very broad. They have a full aspect of humanity. And so the stereotypes, one, center the tribe to only be this way and seen this way, even though the tribal culture is really this whole thing. You're not near often where you are. This gets into that whole land-based thing. When you used to have tribes, and you used to be able to practice your culture, and you used to have access to everything that you need to do that, colonization creates it down to this. It becomes the reason why reservations don't have things. You're not being put on the best part of the lands that you were on. You're getting put into the junk. And then anytime you start to build something up like gaming, suddenly you have the feds will come in there and tax it. The fact that we have to pay taxation on working for the tribe or doing things on tribal land because quote unquote, like these laws that are out there that then say that's still taxable. That's still taxable, even though I'm working for the tribe to do very things. All these governmental limitations on the tribe to really be able to develop itself just throttles the tribe, throttles its ability to take care of its people in the way that it would culturally, because the only avenues then is ask for grants, and we're really going to struggle now, is that you so throttled the tribe or reliant on these certain things, and now you don't. Even though I'll tell you government to government, and this is the hard part thing as Native people often is your valued stated things of what you would want aren't your actual practices within most of these systems. We value individualism, but we really don't value your tribal individualism in the way that you need to be days off on Christmas, even though you're not Christian, but we're not going to worry about your Columbus Day or whatever this is. It's always the actual practice is different than the stated kind of belief and view. And I think that's in all kinds of different ways, not just that, but that's part of it is a belief that, hey, tribes, you can go do what you want. You're sovereign until we tell you you can, or we're going to tax it in a way that it doesn't matter. If you could do it, you won't do it, or whatever that is. And I think that's true. But I think for the individual, it is often, am I allowed to be whatever I want to be? And that can be from the allowance to even be able to get there within a system that's not valuing your creativity or whatever that is, that intelligence. And we were talking about education at the last one. I don't just see education as the American education attainment. It's about being educated in plants and different ways of knowing and being. And that's also very important. But you can't then even access the plants. I can't go to, like, with the Navajo Nation, you have those mountains. You can't get to them. You can't be there. You let people climb on certain rocks during a time when you shouldn't be there. Yeah, because we all got to be good citizens of the United States, and yet some of these were tribally specific. You can't go practice your religion in the way you want because it's really in your head. There's always these supposed allowances that really don't allow you to be. And as a Native person who's gone across the United States, trying to think of these different places which are specific to our history in these very locations, that like some of the Pawnee lands are on private land. You'll never get a chance to go up there. And, so it's like knowing this is a part of who we are, but knowing I'm not allowed to access it. And that's like all over the nation. I think that's how I see that. So the stressors is the entirety of all of these things. And you just know it's like, feel it. We were just talking about, who am I going to marry and whether or not they're going to be a tribal member and seen as a tribal member or not, and then can I pass on life? or now our land is so fractionated, under 5%, it goes to this person. It won't go as it would, and can't even do a communal kind of thing because that doesn't fit the system in the way that's easy to, and it really is just about ease, right? If I have to track 300 people, but let's just make it to where we can do 100 and you guys get this line, and you guys, your family, right? They'll take care of you. But that's not how the practice would have been. So it's a lot of these different things. Actually, you have a professor at University of Washington. What's her name? She was a Stanford grad. And she's talking about mascots and those different kinds of things. I mean, that all goes into the same play. I can't even think of her name now. But you have a professor there at University of Washington.
Not sure.
Yeah.
And excuse me if this is like ignorant, but please correct me. But like as young people, and I'm saying this because I'm an immigrant, right? So I always feel like I'm in between my original culture and this culture, and like you're not this and you're not that, and everyone's judging you for who you choose to be. Do you feel like there's a tension for younger generations to like you want to identify with your culture, you want to be close, you care, you want this, but you also want to be you and your individual self? Does that play out in life a lot? Is that a stressor?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm relaying a lot of my own feelings, but
Navajo and white, so I'm biracial. And then like with blood quantum, I'm half Navajo. That's what I'm enrolled as with my certificate of Indian blood. And just like the idea that I have to quantify myself a certain way is very difficult. But then I'm very white passing. So then I get denied a lot of like people saying you're not native, you don't look native. From both like natives and general population. So I feel like there is a struggle, not from everyone, but to feel like myself, which is complicated. And then why we talked about marriages too, because like then my partner's not native. And so if we have kids, they'd be a quarter, and that's the last to enroll with the Navajo Nation. And I get a lot of pressure because I'm the oldest granddaughter, and Navajo's matrilineal, and I'm my mom's only daughter. So I get a lot of pressure of like kids and like keeping traditions going. Complicated.
yeah, no.
Can I ask you mentioned gaming, how that fits in? Is that a stress? Is that a good, bad, mixed, sort of mixed impacts? What's your sense?
You mean directly as gaming in terms of
how it affects culture?
No, it's
I mean, it brings in money, but then it changes, practice of culture.
Right, but see, that's where I think this becomes, so why shouldn't tribes game, right? Of course they should be allowed to game. We've always gamed. Should we not be allowed to just create any kind of funding to be able, if that's the system we're going to utilize, that I can take care of people their money, and then the tribe creates something to create money, then you already know the government's going to come in there and say, you can't do it, you have to do it this way and this and that. It's bad for you, but we'll go do statewide gaming. So this is something I think as an older person, not necessarily when I was a kid, you would recognize it. But as you get into that age and you get into college, you start to recognize we get attacked, ICWA gets attacked. Literally every month and a half, there's a new case against trying to get rid of Indian Child Welfare Act in some kind of formal way throughout all the different states. And so even as you get educated, you start to recognize it's this constant shift. There's a constant attack. And I think someone who's gone and got an education, whereas I probably didn't notice it before, but as an adult who now has to raise my own kids, I'm highly aware of, I need to explain to them, to my children, be aware that these little chips over time do have a real effect, because why can't I get scholarship money to go from my tribe to go to college? Well, because we can't generate the funding to do it, because the belief of gaming being a negative or bad or whatever it is, we've always done gaming. We've always had those kinds of games. Fishing rights in Washington State were, well, you can do it as long as you just feed your family. If you take it and you go selling it, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And I was in Washington during that time. I lived in Puyallup, Washington from 79 to 84. And that's right when people were fishing in direct treaty allowance. But if you went and actually tried to sell it, then we can tax it. Why? Why should that be if that's a traditional way of doing it? And we would have used fishing in different ways for those tribes up there to make those connections to help get benefits for land. So you're going to say, hey, you need to do and learn how to use the money system. Because that's how we do it. Your traditional way of communal, whatever, you shouldn't do that. You need to get rid of that. As soon as you start doing it, okay, now we're going to take it from you too.
Yeah.
Well, why? And that's something I think as someone as I've gone and got educated and could understand those systems, I'm definitely raising my children to be aware of that. Whereas I don't think my parents did, but I need to be aware of the other end of it is languages and the viewing of the world that comes through languages not being valued. We have, my mother was boarding school at Lucille talks about boarding school. So you go get these educations, you have to do this, but then there's always this contradictory other end of it of, yeah, but you went to Haskell or you have knowledge of this, it's not a value. It's like in every aspect. And it's just little things, yeah.
Staring at you and you can't win.
It almost, that's, I think, we're talking about suicide. That's what it is. It's the microaggression or whatever term you want to give it. It changes every 30 years. It's the same thing. The fact we're having this discussion, it was done 20 years before. Probably done 40 years before. But we need to study it. What's going to happen in 10 to 20 years? I wonder, because when I was in college, we were brought in the early 90s to say, hey, how could the university be better? Found out there's a report done in the 70s. And I'm about to tell you the exact same thing you were told in the 70s. What's the point of this?
Yeah.
And then if I come back in 2010, hey, did you get better? Are we doing better? Did you do any of the things? Well, we've already told you. Federal and boarding schools. That's been knowledge within our community since the time kids were taken. And every generation knows it. We can do it. Luckily, I'm at History Colorado. Hopefully, we can make a change in this state. But there's always going to be this automatic push of, well, it makes us look bad. You did bad. You know, it's like, it's such enough. Yeah, until you can acknowledge you did bad. I had this discussion of equity. Equity is under attack now because it's like unfair. Well, it was unfair when we tried to make an agreement and then you lied about things and you did things different and you took certain things, you've taken away, and that's what goes into gaming. You've taken away the ability of the people to be who they are by language, which is most incredibly important thing, because that the way you conceive of the world through language is such a different way in the way this whole language is structured. Translation from English back into the tribal language isn't the same as viewing the world from a language that describes the world in a very different way. And I sometimes wonder if that's not the frustration of some people, and that if you grew up in a very native community, hearing how to look at the world, do you have the right words to even state what it is you're feeling and thinking? That I think creates a frustration. And then as I say it, those who are English speaking or the teachers saying, that's not how you use English, you're not very good at it. But I'm not trying to be good at that. I'm trying to get across the thinking and the idea of it. Now you're telling me, in a sense, the whole idea and thinking, because I can't put in the proper English words, is deminimized. Minimized. And so it's, I think some of the stressors are really an unknown when you're a child. You're just feeling it. And it's not until I went to college and I did law, I've done these other things. You start to see there's never a time in Native American law where when you won, you won. The tribe has won, but it's been particularized and it's taken away. It's hard to do higher level education and not start to see stuff and not to deal with it. Dang, is it going to get any better? I've learned so much more, and I'm starting to say, hell, it's not good. But also, if I come out and say it, then it's also like, oh, you're just not. Oh, you're just. And how many people who go get their PhDs, do you hear of Native people that struggle to work with those who are in the field who have oversight over them, saying, well, this isn't meet what we're expecting. Not me. I mean, I have so many PhD people. No, sorry, you guys. But that struggle over acknowledging what it is that they're studying as being of the level that your people oversight, because it's not directly in line with that culture, and often is not just about this. It's really over here, and so it's a combination of your thoughts. But since you want to categorize this is this knowledge and this is this knowledge, we're saying no, it's somewhere in here. Well, that doesn't quite meet our requirements of your degree in history. It's really sociology. Well, you're not really just doing sociology. You're talking, yeah, because our thinking is over here, but you don't create avenues for that.
Avenues for people.
So when you guys work with Native.
That's amazing. And yeah, it does a little bit too, because I feel like on the earlier question, but also to how you relate to exactly what you're describing.
Just sorry to
Sorry.
interrupt you, but we have like 2 minutes. So
I'm
like
sorry.
kind of like last thoughts. Then we have to go into another question.
I'll just say,
No.
Yeah.
I'm the elder generation,
Mhm.
before EDI existed.
Mhm.
And we always, for, at least in my acquaintanceship, saw the glasses half full, not half empty.
Mm-hmm.
And a great amount of progress has been made for Native America in my 50 years plus in the field. And that's what I focus on, is the victories and the step back. And granted, there's still a lot of work to do, and it will go on. I still remain quite optimistic and celebrate the victories in some years in the field.
It's a good reminder.
Amazing. Yeah. Daily, any thoughts?
Yeah, just to kind of, and I think something at the more like foundation level is that I feel like a lot of our cultural values, what we're taught often contradicts what we're taught in like the more Western systems,
Yeah.
I think as somebody who's younger too, my grandparents always taught me, we have 2 ears to listen and we have 1 mouth to speak. So we were taught the importance of like letting others, speak as well, and really just understanding, allowing others to have that place. It's really about respect, I think. And so I think just I guess navigating the complex nature of those, contradicting systems. Yeah.
And the fact that being in a US PhD program requires you to be out there promoting yourself and all that, which clashes directly with how you were raised. Also same as a Lebanese person. So
I'd also like to add that when I was a young person, I typed manuscripts for a First Nations anthropologist, Darcy McNichol. And the one thing that resonated with me then and still does is his premise that cultures that don't change die. And I think we don't need to, overreact to changing native cultures, because that's how we will survive into the future and hopefully.
2 more seconds, please. Tell us what keeps you optimistic. Honestly, like, is it a personal thing or is it?
It's certainly part of it is personal, part of it is family. You immerse yourself in, quote, the work however you take it on. But if you're an optimist, you will celebrate the achievements and not the disappointments. And that will always give you more energy to keep going. And also, I think, perspective too. And those that come behind.
I'm writing that down for me, not for the report. Just saying, I'm gonna need to remember this.
It's very helpful.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Oh,
No, I mean,
No,
if
that's
you're ever thinking about
being old.
PhDs and degrees, and if you're ever wondering about any of that and just want to talk it out, I'm here anytime.
Yeah, USC.
Yeah, I'm at USC and I'm also like a misfit in general and like, just being an immigrant. So I'm saying this without live streaming. But maybe I should have paid attention sooner.
around the and then we'll do one question and ask each of you for some comments and thoughts on that question, and then we will break for lunch. So, and I think we're probably behind schedule and we're living with that.
We are behind schedule,
Yeah,
but
okay.
it's okay.
Yeah, anyway. So I'm Andy Dannenberg. I teach at the University of Washington in Seattle. I come from public health. And I work at the intersection with urban planners and health. So really what your land and how land is used and how things are built have effects on your health.
I'm Elizabeth Boyle, or Liz Boyle. I'm a senior program officer at the National Academy of Sciences, and I'm staff here for this project. So nice to be with you.
Should I go next?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rima Hover. I'm an associate professor at USC in Los Angeles. Do environmental health, air pollution, and climate change work. Thanks for coming. Sina.
Okay.
I am Sina Harjo. I'm Seminole, Choctaw, and Creek, born and raised on the south side of Denver.
I'm Rachel Brian Ocker. I'm a citizen of the Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska. I grew up here in Denver. I'm also the tribal liaison for our State Department of Health and Environment, but opinions expressed are my own and not opinions of my employer.
My name is Kimberly Blackhorse. I'm from the Four Corners area. I also work at CVPHE, Colorado, and I am the tribal health data specialist there. And again, I would like to also give a disclaimer.
Yeah, that's.
Good morning, my name is Katie Brown Cardinal. I am a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. I am originally from Durant, Oklahoma. And my family and I moved here from Fort Worth, Texas 15 years ago. So I've raised my kids here in the Denver community.
Okay, so the question for this group, and you've said what a question in each group, so you kind of know how it works, is what makes your community more vulnerable to stressors? So think of what some of the stressors are that you deal with and makes it more vulnerable to deal with it.
I think we did this.
What?
Did you? We did. Our last
What question? Do you know what questions are being said
Yeah,
in the
we do.
auditorium?
Oh, okay. So you think you had that question?
It just sounds like when we just answered.
There's the main stressors in your community.
One is yeah, what are the stressors? And then what are the barriers to your response to them? And then this one is what makes you more vulnerable.
Well, then I guess we could just do it again and maybe Kim can start.
Or did you not have one of those other
Well,
ones?
vulnerable was definitely a key word in the second question that was posed in the last session. So in the last session, we answered 3 questions. Absolutely.
Oh, did you do all? You weren't doing just one question?
Were you with John Ben?
In the auditorium?
Oh, no, that wouldn't have been.
Right, that was Rachel.
Yeah, that's Rachel and Miles.
And they went through all 3 questions?
Let me look at your questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they were supposed to do that one, then we were given this one, and then there's the question 3.
Oh, yeah. We did this one in the first one, and then we did all 3 of them in the second one.
Oh.
Maybe.
But Rachel Kim has not answered any of the questions yet because she was.
You're being put on the spot. It's all you, Kim. It's all you.
So you just ask her all the questions.
In saying that, I guess I will say a different vulnerability
Okay.
than I said in the last session.
Okay.
It could also be that things you feel like you wanted to talk about that didn't
That
get
we
much
didn't.
of a chance.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
think it's
Yeah.
helpful to stick with this one for wherever you want to go with it, because then when we report back, we'll be reporting answers to that. So if we go to other questions, it doesn't fit in as well to say, now we're answering some other questions. But
We'll do it however you.
okay, yeah, well, we think about what you want to say about this. So it's what makes you more vulnerable. Let's just see where it goes and things you haven't had a chance to say. So did you want to go first?
What is the question?
Okay, so what makes your community more vulnerable to stressors? So why?
I think right now, in the given climate that we're in, racial discrimination and inequities that affect health inequities. I think they're a stressor. Also, the lack of education, the cultural willingness, cultural competency, or
On whose part, if you don't mind?
Western society in general. In terms of
a colonized aspect of implementing on other. I think when we're talking about DEI, part of that also includes justice and decolonization at the table.
Can you tell us what you mean with the word decolonization?
So there is a set Western standard of whether it be research, whether it be protocol, bureaucracy. And I think that was ingrained historically. Decolonization, I think, is recognizing and bringing that also to the conversation or to the table in principles, values, and morals on how we conduct, for example, communication skills, leadership.
Thoughts?
Nation. We've heard about that a lot. What does that mean to you? Is it a vulnerability? Yeah. I think when you're introduced to a new area. So I grew up in the Four Corners where community is pretty much almost homogenous, I would say. Yeah. To an certain extent, but there's also an implementation of when you take yourself outside of tribal settings and you put yourself into an urban setting or into a setting that is you're not used to. You try to find community. You try to find certain things, straight-based factors that would help you in a sense. When you go to school, when you go to university, those even in rural settings may not have access to the education such as at Denver. And they would have to move, and that creates isolation, and you are vulnerable, and you go through sociological factors, psychological factors. There is a term where you don't think you start questioning yourself. What is that term? You think it until you make it. Imposter syndrome. Yeah, imposter syndrome. You go through imposter syndrome, and finding a base is difficult, especially within a new area, in your communities. And then on top of that, you have to do what you have to do while you came here. Work, or get an education, or find funding to live here in order to accomplish your goals.
Is this particularly going into a university or just moving to a city and working generally? Yeah, just leaving the community. Yeah.
And you're put into a place. I mean, and this hasn't just happened just now. I mean, historically, it has happened in the past. We can think of something where in school, the kids had to move to a certain area. Again, with relocation, people had to move. They had to survive. And we're still going through the same aspect of that. And then when you talk about stretchers, you bring in what I can think of is racial discrimination. Racial discrimination, does it play out in different ways with different tribes, you think, or are people just ignorant to any differences across tribes? You know, like, does it affect one group more than the other? Do you see it the same everywhere? Katie nodding her head, as in every tribe has their own experience with racial discrimination.
Given the time, within the,
Yeah.
all factors included in
Place.
Both of you work with the state, is that what I understood? Are you able to, personal opinion, not representing them, say how that works out? Are you able to, you kind of work as liaisons to tribal communities?
Answer that.
Does that work? Is incredibly hard to do? What can you say about it?
I think the biggest need is around helping folks understand things like tribal sovereignty and contemporary Native nations, and that not only do they exist, but they have a really unique political standing. And, there's enormous education burden there. I think, people are not, we talked a lot about visibility when we answered this question in our other group. And I think the piece about visibility is people really don't engage with contemporary tribal life very much. A lot of, well-educated, very bright, wonderful people don't even know what a contemporary tribal nation is, what tribal sovereignty is, what it means to be a tribal member. That's just not part of the common American lexicon. And I think, sometimes folks present that as accidental. I'm not confident that it is. I think that it's
systematic.
Yeah, I think it is an uncomfortable thing for the system to approach at best. And so, there is a huge burden of before we can even get to programmatic partnership, system partnership, the tangible meat of what needs to be done, you have to start with, this is what this is. And you have to start at that baseline continuously. And I would rather do that, and that's my job, than have the tribes have to do it when there are not, folks who work internally within systems to try to take that burden on. I think it's better that there be people paid internally to do that piece so that when tribal partners come to the table, they can actually start farther along down the conversation and get to the meat and the potatoes of what needs to be accomplished. But I noticed that burden is huge, even among people who you would consider very well educated, right? And so, I think that is related to the visibility issue. It is related to certainly some of the racial discrimination issues, but I also think, even beyond racial discrimination, that broader political status piece as well.
Are you seeing some successes? Do you go home at the end of the day, felt like you got somewhere, or frustrated, or what's your world like?
I think we have plenty of frustrations and plenty of successes.
Okay.
So I feel fair.
At least some of both. Okay.
I think we have gotten farther than where it was when we started, but there's also an immense area to go. We still have enormous health inequities for American Indians, Alaska Natives in Colorado. The only group, according to our own department's most recent report, the only group by race and ethnicity in Colorado whose life expectancy is going in a downward direction in the state over the past 20 years. And that is very consistent with national level data. Just a wide variety of areas where there are major health disparities. So much to do.
Do you mind telling us a little bit more about how the different tribes' experiences could be different in terms of experiencing discrimination?
I don't know what your familiarity is with the Denver community, but as we said in our first meeting, Denver is what is called a removal city, where reservation people in the 50s and 60s, all over the country, tribes from North Dakota, South Dakota, Oklahoma, New Mexico, they were offered job training in urban hubs such as Denver, Dallas, Oklahoma City, San Francisco, Minneapolis, to assimilate the people to say, okay, if you want to live in this area, be a nurse or be a welder. So with that, with the families, being like a nuclear family, not so much in our tribal ways where we're more an extended family where the grandparents, aunts, uncles, everybody is mom and dad, not just as aunt and uncle, our personal familial terms of acknowledgement, our kinship ways. And so that made it more the nuclear family with people having to depend on our Indian centers and Indian clinics and family resource centers for resources. And with that, with so many tribes being in one area, being here 15 years, Denver's like a gateway. So many people, especially the Plains tribes, they kind of go through, hang around in a city for a few years, have relatives, and then go on to the next. But there's no cohesiveness within our tribes. When Sid said the greeting this morning, the introduction, and he prayed in his Lakota language, I only know that because I've lived in Denver for 15 years. I know some of my Choctaw language, but when you have those divides, it's like, well, everybody just assumes you're Lakota or Navajo because that's the two main tribes represented here, and being Seminole, Choctaw, Alaska Native, there's not that many, and we have our own ways. And what they might do is like, no, we can't do this. This is taboo for that. And so that's an immediate, what would you say? Vulnerability and barrier. Because if we can't get on the same page as generic natives, just being Indian, as we say, then we're not just, it's not just textbook. If we were raised in our own respective communities, families with our own ways. And so it's not just blanket ABC, for our own practices. So that is a barrier, just trying to get the community together. As far as one to be say, okay, we're going to put that Indian label on you, and it's going to be cookie cutter for every tribe, which isn't the case. Even for our services back home, like for Choctaws, if you live in our area is Southeast Oklahoma, and we have what's called the 10.5 counties, certain areas where our capital is, and they'll give you car seats, and you can use the full Choctaw hospitals, and other tribes can use the hospitals, but you have to live in Durant or around those areas. And they do elder food, and they give them meat, ponds, fruit, vegetables, gift cards, and they have a lot of services, and you can rent an apartment through the tribe. They have their own little communities that they've built, and you can get a house through Choctaw Housing, and you finance it through the nation. But again, you have to live in the tribe, and not every tribe does that. A lot of tribes, we have our own federal or fiscal corruption. Everybody gets their hands in that money, and where is it? Where did it go? So that's, not every tribe is offered the same services. And even here, if we have to go back home to use those resources. So that's a barrier. That's, the first obstacles and things like that from what we come to expect living in Denver.
Other thoughts?
Can you read the question?
Okay, yeah. It's the what makes your community more vulnerable to stressors?
And this is like the last thought, because we gotta.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we
go
got it.
downstairs.
Okay.
Not miss lunch.
You can answer whatever you like to say. Okay. I'll answer this question, that's fine. I think that a lot of things have been said through the sessions that we participated in. We shared a bunch on this question in the last session, so check in with them.
Yeah, that was.
But I think the thing that keeps coming up for me that maybe has been touched upon a little bit, and Katie just touched a little bit upon it, and is I think that something that makes our unique community uniquely vulnerable is a spiritual disconnection. So before colonization, we had tribal methods for healthcare, mental wellness, community organization, people management, cultural education, all of those pieces. And through colonization, lots of disconnection has happened through boarding schools, through termination, through reservation, through allotments, through relocation, through all of those mechanisms. There are a large population of tribal folks who have been spiritually disconnected from homelands, home cultures, dare I say ancestors with children who have been pulled from homes and may not know their lineage or have connections. And before colonization, we had methods to care for ourselves when we were vulnerable, ways to protect ourselves when we knew this hardship was coming, or when we feared this attack, or we knew that we were going to have to overcome an obstacle. And we have limited access to those things now. And with elders dying, with the effects of COVID taking language speakers away, with language loss, with less land to have access to have less traditional herbs and tribal dance practices and ceremonies, there is this big disconnection for what was given to us traditionally as a tribal support, a spiritual support system, a belief in something bigger, an interconnectedness that we are longing for, which historically and traditionally has been a foundation of who we are as we developed as an individual, as a people, as a nation. And now some of those foundational pieces around identity and culture and language, spirituality and practices are missing, and lots of our people are lost. And when you're lost, it's really easy for you to make more risky choices and to not access resources, to not feel safe in other spaces, to not have a landing place to come home to. And so all of these Western vulnerabilities and 21st century vulnerabilities are really true, really valid, but they all sit on top of internal spiritual disconnection, trauma, hardship, loss that our communities have not healed. It's genetically passed in our bones and in our DNA makeup from one generation to another. So our babies are being born with a physically changed DNA that stores all of these hardships and these spiritual disconnections and trauma that we've experienced as a people. We have not. And that for me is a bigger undertone of a vulnerability that is a unique vulnerability to individuals. That vulnerability looks different for people, African Americans who have participated in slavery, or Jewish folks who have participated in the Holocaust, and European immigrants who were running from religious persecution. All those have their own unique things, but loss that tribal people have experienced, we have not healed. And we're vulnerable.
Do you think interconnectedness or coming together again could be a healing force?
I see it happening in tribal communities all over. That's why there's a real push to save tribal language. There's a real push to have tribal-led schools that are teaching tribal cultures. It's where there's a real push to figure out how to have Medicaid pay for traditional healing medicine, traditional healing practices. That's where there's a real push for really culturally responsive mental health providers, spiritual healers, a real push for funding for tribal ceremonies to happen, for regalia, for eagle feathers, for all of this resurgence of knowledge sharing and within a tribal culture, and then figuring out how we as tribal people move that forward in a flexibility and adaptivity that's going to make that knowledge really hold and stay true to be able to pass to future generations.
Very well spoken. Thank you. Thank you. Need to.
I mean, unless anyone else has something else they want to add. That was a big speech to share. I really appreciate it.
We did.
You actually made me realize, for the science nerd in me, that we actually really have to talk about intergenerational trauma and how that's epigenetically transmitted, and that's a big vulnerability.
I mean, the way we hold it, I mean, on top of how our DNA has changed, where we hold it in the Venus line, is that what we call it? I think it's called the Venus line.
Like your nervous system
Yes.
and how it responds.
Yes,
to-
and it's not tribally specific, but there's a really good book called My Grandfather's Hands. If you're really interested in learning about how bodies of color store trauma. And so if you haven't read that book, read it.
Thank you. I'll
Included
look
in
it
your
up.
reference.
Yeah,
But our bodies, we store it
definitely.
lots of different ways. Yeah. And our children, they know it.
I can't hide much from the kids.
Yeah,
Well,
every generation historically has had something that, we have to be our own advocate, like in the 70s with AIM and that's right. Just fight for our existence. I'm as I said, another group, I'm 48 years old. In my mom's lifetime, she was born in 1957. She passed this Saturday will be 3 years that she's been gone. She'd be 67 years old. She picked cotton. In Durant, Oklahoma in the 50s, there were not other minorities. It was whites and Indians. Oh, the dirty Indians, they live on the east side of the tracks. And my mom was the oldest girl of 8 kids. And so she had to be the mom they lived in a 4-room house by a creek. Not 4-bedroom, not, 2-car garage and this, that, no.
So what we'll do is a quick introduction around the table, same as you did this morning, and then we'll get to our question. So I'm Andy Dannenberg. I teach at the University of Washington in Seattle, and I have been in public health for many years. I also work in urban planning, and sort of that intersection of public health and your built environment, your physical world around you has major impacts on health. Go ahead, Jenny.
Dr. Mulkey, I'm the Executive Director of the Denver Indian Family Resource Center. I am Stina from the Navajo Nation. She, her, hers is the pronouns. Spencer Green, Colorado Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing, Colorado's Administrator for Medicaid, and Tribal and County Liaison.
Brendan Morrison, Chief Principal of Blue Sky Wealth Group. I'm a Tsimshian Nation. It's originally from Alaska. Tsimshian is Alaska Native.
So, hi everyone, I'm Rima Haber. I'm an associate professor at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. I do a lot of work on air pollution, climate change, and environmental health.
DJ Birdbear, University of Denver Astrophysics. I'm an enrolled member of Mandan Hidatsa Nation, and my mother is Dene also. So always nice to be in the company of relatives. And it's I thank everyone for their engagement and their time today. Obviously, it comes at a great premium.
Very much appreciate you taking time to join us.
I don't know if I did. I'm Liz Boyle. I'm a senior program officer at the National Academy of Sciences, and I'm staff on this project. So thanks to all of you for being here. Thanks, Rima.
Thank you. No, my fault for not
Oh,
noticing.
no.
What do you mean?
Yeah. No, I didn't even know the segment introduced myself. So. I've been looking at you guys all day, so we're all friends.
So the question, and let me just read it, and then we sort of help interpret it, but then go where you want with it. All these are really to help get discussion started, and some people get a little bit away from the question. That's absolutely fine. That's happened continuously, as you've probably seen. So the question is worded, what are the opportunities to improve decision-making tools by incorporating tribal knowledge and data? And the parts of that question that I'll pull out, but then you're welcome to interpret. Decision-making tools includes things such as cumulative impact assessment, which is what this committee focuses on. It means that it is one of the tools that may be used on the local, state, federal level to help, where do resources go? What should we be working on? Those tools get developed over time and used in various ways, but often don't incorporate tribal knowledge. And so what we're asking is, can you help us figure out better ways that what you know from your experiences can be incorporated into those tools? An example would be that some of the tools might be a screening tool that gives a certain amount of weight to certain features that might be in environment, some of the equity tools that these populations do or don't have certain things. And so that what elements go into that tool then help guide where maybe future resources go. So can we have tribal knowledge and experiences as part of some of those elements that go into that tool that then help guide future resources? It's sort of a long-winded way. How do we incorporate tribal knowledge? We firmly believe you have terrific knowledge and experience that we don't have, and want to figure out how to incorporate that into where some of the bigger picture choices are being made in some of those decision-making tools. So, does that make sense? And does that fit the question as far as you understood? So we just, whoever is comfortable, any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't want to rain on anybody. Parade,
Okay.
Andy Donnenberg. Unless you're one of the founding fathers of the Constitution, really the point is moot.
Okay.
We on the MHA, obviously fall under the jurisdiction of this new executive order on national emergency with energy production, so that you aren't going to be able to utilize any of our traditional knowledge because, of course, the Great White Father is going to decide how things play out on the MHA, simply because we stand on the second largest oil reserves in North America. And with energy independence being what the buzzword that it is, that will override any sort of contribution.
If I can add a little to that, let's look at longer term, because I think
things
are horrible now, but
get better. Unless you want to amend the Constitution, you're not going to change anything because you're going to have to address issues of sovereignty. And until you're willing to do that, again, this conversation is rather one-sided.
Okay.
That'd be a good start. But I get like the one thing I would say, you said the founding father. I mean, I think one thing is just like giving credit where credit's due. Is like I'm a big history nerd, and like the one thing that was just infuriating to me is like the effect of Haudenosaunee Nation had. Haudenosaunee is like the basis of American democracy, or what we call American democracy. The founding fathers could be accused of plagiarism for what they put together. But there is all these, whatever you want to call it, the settlerness kind of put out that natives aren't capable of the things that clearly they are, that they don't want to give credit for that type of stuff. I think that would be a step where just giving credit where credit dues. There's so many things that are brushed under the rug. Why would we play more?
I guess I would add, in terms of what you're saying, is at least some local and state areas can be a little more progressive, even if it looks horrible at the national level. that you'll get some places able to move some things forward?
Definitely, Andy.
Yeah.
I can't speak for what's going on the Oneida Reservation. I
Yeah.
can't speak for
Yeah.
what's happening on the Cherokee. I can tell you what's happened on the MHA, and because we are a domestic dependency, we aren't going to change that status.
Yeah.
And because of the way the executive branch works, that you will never have an opening for that traditional knowledge.
Mhm.
It will not be possible. Well, obviously, the Constitution, it overrides any sort of states' rights. And it's only the U.S. Congress that can engage with the American Indian. I mean, that is literally written in the Constitution. To that end, we cannot lean on or resort for state remedy.
Mhm.
So, until that changes, holler.
Okay. I appreciate this.
I will say, having lived in North Dakota,
Yeah.
say it's horrible, horrible. Not the res, they're nice.
I would agree with the point that, yeah, at the national level, not so much so. But I think in my experience, I think the movement building that's happening at the local levels, utilizing and the reconnection of traditional knowledge has been very helpful.
Okay.
I think one thing that is important is to continue to have intergenerational spaces.
Mhm.
That's really important because I think sometimes we get so enmeshed in the settler colonial vision that we forget these knowledges that we have, that's always taking care of us, are things that I think we need to reconnect to. Like our children are valuable, their input is valuable. Elder, knowledge is definitely valuable. And I think another important thing is to hear from the community as a decision-making tool. When I was doing community organizing on the Navajo Nation, we couldn't act like we knew what was best for our people. So we organized 6 public forums in different parts of the reservation and directly asked our people, what is it about this specific issue that you're not seeing done, that needs to change, that needs to da 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 da. And we got the feedback we needed. We were able to incorporate and we were able to put enough pressure on our tribal leaders to be advocating for us at the federal level.
Mhm.
So at that time, I was working for Navajo Nation Legislative Branch as policy analyst. And we had a chance to take what the community, what they wanted, what they needed, and we were able to provide testimony in front of the U.S. Senate Committee on Indian Affairs.
Mhm.
We had a chance to voice it to the FBI there. We told them what was going on. When we were talking about the missing and murdered crisis there, I remember we responded to a case near Sheep Springs, and the FBI agent that was there, he was like, we asked him, what are we going to do? And he's like, well, if I were you, you should go get a gun. That's what they're telling our community members.
Yeah.
So something had to change because we knew at that level, federal level, there wasn't going to be any type of movement to address those things. So we organized at a community level. We taught folks how to safety plan in those type of situations. We created a missing persons toolkit to teach the community how to navigate those jurisdictions that, because they could call a missing persons case that was in Shiprock, but they're calling Farmington for some reason, which is so teaching the community about the jurisdictional issues. So, and it just kind of snowballed into this regional training that we do and provide now out in the Four Corners area. So I think having the community voices really created this really important momentum in probably the most rural place. When if you call an officer, it takes 3 to 6 hours to respond on the Navajo Nation.
Wow.
Our police officers out there have the highest rate of being victimized because you send one officer into a domestic violence situation. That's the highest rate of why Navajo tribal officers are dying is domestic violence disputes. So I think there's power in community. I think there's power in community voices to really set a chain at more of a local level to create those influences. And I think that's just kind of where it has to stay at times is in the local area, because I think if that's not influencing, like the bigger level of whatever this government is working exactly the way it was designed. It's not broken. It's not made for us. It's made for white land owning white men at that time. So we have to think about, how do we create these systems at our own level? How are we organizing, and how are we having like effective communication with one another to make sure that these things are happening? And these movements aren't as visible because they're not something that's like completely mainstream. But they've been effective, and people are more knowledgeable. They know how to navigate the system. They're able to leverage these relationships throughout the Four Corners area. And it's even intertribal, where we have other tribes reaching out to us saying, hey, you guys have this toolkit. How do you guys use it? And then we share it with them. So it's also sharing. I think in the urban area, in terms of decision-making tools, I haven't been here that long. I mean, Brendan's on the Denver Commission, so I probably could speak more to that, how it looks like here. I'm still kind of getting used to the landscape, but at least in a tribal community, that's kind of what it looked like, especially for the largest tribal nation in the US. It's a lot of community organizing that has to happen.
I just become curious that why you guys take the law into your own hands. And why? Well, that's the whole thing. In and of itself is the inherent hypocrisy of the whole action, that the government is not fulfilling its obligations, that they're not going to listen to us. That literally we are talking vigilante justice, even though in a good sense.
And they're encouraging it.
Oh, go ahead.
On a structural level, something I've also heard is that there needs to be a guarantee of data sovereignty and data privacy. We've talked a lot this morning about the historical facts of mistreatment, and also just the general mistrust of federal and state or other official agencies. And so ownership of data and assurances that that data is properly stored, taken care of, is utilized appropriately would be the absolute baseline before it makes sense to even ask to use that data in another way.
That is a good point. Something I was just thinking is, if you're looking for indigenous problem solving, stuff like that, I don't think you're asking a lot, because there's a historical background on it. Like, I think old dudes just drop bombshells of wisdom every once in a while. Called it protected corn, which was like natives. We're friendly people. We have a desire to help. You see someone in need, you want to help them, that kind of stuff. And he kind of goes back to what the Pilgrims was. These were refugees, starving. They wanted to help, taught them how to grow corn. They grew corn, and then murdered them. So it was kind of that, like, that's the historical background to think about. Like, well, now you're asking me to solve another problem. Last time you didn't. And by that, what is helpful to me is like I cutthroat industry sometimes, and it was kind of have this natural desire to want to help or protect your corn, like say something for yourself, like. And I think not wrong. I mean, it's absolutely not wrong. And that is something that I'm not I would never fault a native on. He's not wrong. And I think from a non-native, you need to understand that he's not wrong. That there's historical perspective there that but historically natives help non-natives. Like something bad happens afterwards. We're not over that.
Yeah, and I think sometimes some of those like traditional knowledges, I am all for gatekeeping. I'm all for keeping that within, because I think when we get into the idea of like the American dream or a melting pot, I think that's just messaging to try to erode who we are. And I mentioned this in another group, is we don't have just an ethnic status, we have a political status. And that's powerful. Even right now, that's being, threatened. At some point, it may be. But how do we preserve that? How do we ensure that we don't get to a place where, yeah, I appreciative of other cultures and folks, from varying backgrounds. And I will keep my medicine to myself. I will keep my knowledge to myself.
I was with my cousins, and so like the question to see how much faith a person has in humanity is, if you knew where a Bigfoot was, would you tell anybody? Just, well, no.
I protect Bigfoot.
I'm hearing you would rather not share some of the knowledge because of the mistrust, abuse, treatment.
Yeah, I mean, even not just like in a political sense, but I mean, even like our cultural ways of life have been co-opted by, non-native people who live in the mountains in their yoga retreat, who put sage in their spaces and they're like, oh, I'm so spiritual. It's like, do you even know what that medicine's for? Yeah, it's a cleanser. Like a lot of people know that. But do you know thought behind it? Like you don't just buy it at a store. There's people who grow it, people who gift it to you. There's prayers behind it. There's things that are not abusive towards giving those things away. And when something like that, so precious, becomes abused, you want to take it back to protect it.
One example I'm thinking of is we've done a horrible job on managing our forests, and I gather there's tribal knowledge better. Forest management, would you rather not share what you know about forest management to help all forests? Or
I mean, there were
just wondering where you would be on that.
I'm all for it, but I think like he comes from the biggest forest place.
No.
That, like,
It's not forest in New Mexico once. One time. I might have been reading.
But no, yeah, I think these are traditional knowledges, but I think it's kind of like we have to navigate that all the time. Like as Navajo people, we get brush fires and things like that. So we'll burn everything in the front to prevent anything from.
Yeah, I mean, you have the knowledge.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I was like to answer is to share the knowledge. Like personally, no, this is my answer. But I was just reading a thing in the in the Northwest, there were sections of forest where the management was turned over to different tribes, and they're seeing that the results, however they're doing it was like a 12x better performance when the tribes held management over the forest versus when the rangers did before that. So I mean, like, I kind of do have the protective corn thing in there. Is like, just let the natives do it. They're really good at it. They've been doing it for thousands of years. They got a good system. Yeah, I mean, like we're talking long term. I think that, I mean, that shows goodwill, and that is the first step. Like if down the road that there's some knowledge exchange on there, but yeah, it's you're coming from perspective that like if you just went to the tribe and asked how do you do it, I would tell them that.
You would tell them
it's not information given out on your why, because why? Like what's reciprocal?
The who, right? Like you trust the person, trust their intentions of what they want to do with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a very.
And I think that puts natives always in the position of have to.
Yeah.
Like we always have to be the ones that
right.
Trust.
Never the other way around.
Yeah.
We have all the reasons not to trust.
Yeah, it's been bad enough.
2 minutes and we gotta move.
Other thoughts, comment back? I hear where you're coming from. Yeah.
I mean, it really boils down to get out of our way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not here to recommend. I'm not here to go and give my testimony and say, I hope you listen to me.
Yeah.
Just move out of the way. I'm gonna get it done. Do my thing. I'm gonna do it the right way, and then reap the benefits of our knowledge. But don't let me come and advise you.
Yeah, I feel like 1 minute. You know, data sovereignty and privacy. Obviously, we hear about that lots, right? We know it's important, but could you tell me what does that mean to you? Like, how does that practically? What does that mean practically, especially when you're dealing with federal government?
I think it's allowing the tribes to utilize the data that they collect.
Best utilize or decide who gets to utilize?
I think that too, because I think a lot of times our knowledge is continuously extracted.
Yeah.
Our information is extracted, and there are some agencies that don't know how to steward those things in a respectful manner.
Yeah.
I mean, Arizona State University took blood samples from a neighboring tribe that's indigenous to that area for a diabetes study, and they were sharing out all that information without the consent of that tribe, without the consent of those people, their personal information. Because, you know, they were told one thing, but it was used for something else. But I also think like stories on the ground are important, because when we were working on a human trafficking bill for Navajo Nation, we went to the FBI and US DOJ asking them to give us data on what does human trafficking look like in the Southwest, specifically near like the Gallup area along that I-40 corridor. And they said, oh, we don't have any data. It's not happening. So we had to mobilize and go out there and talk to the people in the ground. And I remember talking to young ladies who were at laundromats or grocery store shopping like first of the month. And they're like, you know, there's these men who come here, they like hit on all the girls and then they leave. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I was here and I didn't give him any attention, but he went to another girl and she kind of felt like, oh, okay. And they left. So it was a grooming tactic to figure out who were the most vulnerable. And they were preying on single Navajo women or Native women that were utilizing the services. So the FBI is not capturing that. They're not in the community asking those questions. So kind of like the vigilante justice, you have people from that community are the ones that have to find it. And they're taking those self-determined strategies to illustrate it. And then when we finally collected all of that information and we worked with the Yurok tribe because they did it in their community, that we took their model and we were able to start collecting data and we showed it to our tribal leaders and we showed it to the FBI. And then they finally started collecting that data and realized that it was happening at the truck stops. It was happening at the laundromats and grocery stores. And it was more so happening online through those dating apps, through like backdoor.com, Craigslist, things like that. So it took the community folks on the ground to like show like, you're not doing your job right. Look what we found. So, yeah. And so then we consolidated a really comprehensive missing persons list. And now the Navajo Nation Police Department uses it. Now US DOJ uses it because we have cases back into the 50s. And we had to do community education, letting people know that there is no timeline on when you can file a missing persons case. And they said, well, I tried telling the police that my auntie's been missing for 15 years and they didn't tell me I could file a missing persons report. So all that data was not even being captured. But I think like at the root of it is they just don't take it seriously because they don't feel like what we're doing is at their so-called level of research and data.
I think that's a really good point. Natives do the best job of taking care of things. And to your question, it's kind of asked, and the natives know the natives are the best to take care of natives, but consistently in the non-native, they with like the settlements and all that stuff, it's like, oh, the natives can't take care of each other. We have to do this, we have to do that, and take and do this and mostly they get in the way.
Yeah.
And to your question, you're asking like how we incorporate native knowledge. You're asking natives to take care of you when you want to let natives take care of themselves.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you. The question is not even one together. Is not a good question. So that's it. Sandra, did you have anything? I want to make sure everyone at least got a chance.
I walked back in about hearing about the Arizona situation. That just underscores like the definite need for being really conscientious about what the ask is in relationship to what the history is, what the intended use is, and what the impact is to the community that you're asking that labor of. Guys,
yeah,
I know we have to.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you being willing to take.
Every time I'm like, I'm sure that half an hour more.
Yeah. So they don't even like.
Yes, because like, why do they have to go do the work to incorporate the knowledge into?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they were here first. Why didn't anyone ask them before?
So were we not sensitive to even have a question like that?
No, I mean, I think the question could be interpreted as how are you going to help us figure out what to do versus do you think there's a useful way to incorporate like these data tools that are out there at the federal level? Do you feel like there's a good way to get your data in them? Does it help you to do that? Or would you rather not get your data in them, for example?
I mean, I'm here. They'd rather we not.
But it's more that like history repeating itself, right? It's like, well, are you kidding me? If we get our data in there, what's that going to help us? And that's just us working for the government, but it never comes back to help us or protect us. And we always have to do it ourselves.
Should we change the question somehow or interpret it differently? I'm a little taken aback, but I fully understand where they are. It's not what I'm expecting.
I mean, that's the value of these things, right? Is like, it's okay. It's good to get their real opinion, you know? And so he was saying, I don't know where MHA is.
Well, you said, I'm not sure either.
You can ask him, but like,
You know what MHA?
that seems to vary.
Is that a tribal?
But I think it's probably a tribe or an area. Like
something like that, yeah.
A region.
I mean, it
So
wasn't
this
like a
video
metropolitan
report
housing
is
authority or something.
Oh,
I'm not sure what it
yeah.
is.
It's funny, I didn't even realize that like these get posted later. It was like blabbering on the last one, but it's okay. But these are part
solid tool right now as we speak. Okay. Tie that into what Sid was saying. We receive funding and we consider that repayment for giving up our lands. And so that helps us support education, social services, and health. Okay, with that said, some of the programs that we have to apply for at this point in time that we go along with it, we go through the process, are now, with this new administration, starting to dictate and say it has to be evidence-based, science-based, as opposed to experiential. Just this morning, I learned some from Rosalie sharing her knowledge as an elder. And, where is that going to fit in to professional development? You tied into more practical. Okay, so the survival of the redwood trees in California. We almost lost them a couple of years ago because of fires. And the reason we almost lost them because of fires is because the government had done away or banned or made it illegal to do burns. And that was the native way of maintaining the land over time. So when you look at, how do we teach or live alongside or co-manage our natural resources, including our human counterparts that we are with. whether it's in health or environment or whatever. That native wisdom is just now starting to be recognized in circles, in pharmaceuticals. I tell people, man, Vicks is the cure all. But anyway, I just want to point that out. That's kind of what we're dealing with now, as opposed to going to more understanding cultural values and accepting them and integrating it into common society. All of a sudden, we're shifting away from that. Just I'm seeing it within the last week. That's come out as a.
Just throw out, because you brought it up. So forest management is something that I guess our Forest Service people have not done terribly well, which is why we have terrible fires. And the Native people really have done better on forest management over the years. What's the best way to convey that Native knowledge so that U.S. Forest Service could do a better job if the Native...
Well, depending on where it's at, we're looking at national parks. So look at Glacier, with the Blackfeet, co-manage.
So co-management would be the best
co-management with the tribes, and utilize their, they've got people that, within the tribes that have come through, gotten their degrees, and you've got the knowledge, traditional knowledge keepers.
And you're saying that in some places for the co-management, or is that really hard to?
Well, I know they're doing that at Yosemite. Okay, that's one thing they kind of agreed to, and they're working with the tribes. I think Glacier, they're starting to. There's some other, obviously the Grand Canyon, some other places I can't remember all of them, but I'm hopeful of that, because who the executive director or the director of the National Park Service is Native himself. Hopefully he'll have more of a voice on some of these partnerships where the tribes are located, some of these naturalists. I hope he stays.
So I was going to say, because thank you, Rick, for saying that. So I walk with 3 different traditional fires in the medicine that I walk in, and we have to earn this in our teachings. This isn't something that's just given to you. And I say this to you in the respect of my ancestors. We have a relationship with the fire. It is alive. There is reverence in how you move with the fire. We have the fire in our bellies, the fire in the earth, the fire in the cosmos. We're not separated from this fire. It is alive. And if you don't respect it, it's going to cause harm. It's going to cause damage, especially if you work with it with the fear mentality. So there are traditional medicines where we've had our traditional people have relationship from generation to generation to generation, who have the understanding of that. Those are the people that need to come in and do the mitigation with the fire, because they've danced with it. They call this a certain dance. I can't disclose the name to you because I just can't. But they have the ancestral wisdom and the knowledge of that. So if you have them out there connecting to the land, not only does it give vitality to their ancestral history, but also vitality to the land, because certain plants only seed when it's burning. So that's another story. But my work that I do is internalize. I internalize everything, because I have to be looking at like, what is going to give me life? What condition am I taking on? What's making me hard? What's making me soft? Like all these things. And that I have to look at. If we are given a voice in a space where you're asking to take our data from us, it's not going to make sense, because it's the authenticity and the integrity with our work. You have to live it. And that is the spirit that comes in and blesses. And that's the ancestral medicine that comes in and blesses us, because we need help from them. And that's what spooked a lot of the Western culture, is because they don't understand that. And it comes in many different ways, right? But we face that, and we've, at least in my work that I do, I have to face it. I don't want to say that I always know what it is, because it's a mystery. But, that is the biggest mirror for us to show up in a space where I am grateful to be with all of our tribal nations. I'm not tribal affiliated. I'm one of the people who've been raised with being from the erasure of our culture. So I'm really grateful that I'm here, but also to create inner relationships so that our tribal nations are seeing each other as relatives and not separated and segregated, because the federal and the state says that we are separate people, or one is less than, or one has more privilege, or one has more right. We want to be able to have a voice to advocate for the land. We want to have a voice to advocate for the water. We want a voice to advocate for all of its inhabitants. The buffalo, we don't want to see the buffalo where they're at. They need to roam the land because their livelihood, like our ancestors knew for the medicine, their science needs to be here on the land because they're a keystone element to what gives life to the soil on this land with the mycelium and the buffalo dung and everything that they bring. They have this ability to do that. We don't. And they will be here long before after we're gone. So we want to advocate for Mother Earth to return back to her natural state. We want to advocate for her to be wild and messy. We don't have to clean up everything because it looks good in society. We want to be able to advocate for what is natural, but what looks a mess to you. You guys think that the way we do things is messy. It's not. It has a higher purpose, and we want to protect that because it's not always seen. What looks like burnt and it's not being used, all of that, the nitrogen of that, the soil is rejuvenating and replenishing, and all the microorganisms underneath that need the protection of that. Nothing has to be developed on top of it. So that is our frame of mind on how we see things. It's not always going to make sense to you because you want to create something that looks whatever. We look at the habitat that is there and we say, what are we disturbing here before we work on the land? What can we offer to the ants? What can we offer to the insects and the bugs that are here? We're going to offer some water because we think the land providing all of this to us. That is the way that we move because we're in this space creating, we're coexisting here on this land. That is anyway that how I move in my medicine for the healing and the work that I do. It's not traditional, but I'm the first person to walk in medicine in my family, and this is the medicine that I'll be passing down to my grandbabies. And I am so grateful that they will have something for themselves. So that is the way that I move. And I always have my Indigenous relatives to guide me, because I need guidance, but that's what's healed me in my space. So
something Beverly just said, like kind of untied this knot in me that started with sort of like what happened, I guess, like during lunch. And like what I want to do is just sort of question the premise of your question, right? So what do tribal practices have to offer, decision-making processes and policy making? It kind of automatically puts us in this position of being like, see, what we do is like really good. You should pay attention. You should, and it's like, I think a more genuine sort of like assessment of what US policy has done, especially in the last 150 years, but I mean, honestly, yeah, is that the US has really fucked things up. Like the white, and it's white is not a monolith. I understand that. But the Euro-American way of understanding things has led us to this precipice of human survival. So I don't even think the question should be, what can Indigenous, practices and knowledge offer? I think the first starting point should be, what do we need to know? What do we need to learn? Because like white society has clearly not learned it. And if you think about, because I study like 20th century US and Native American history, like every single policy, even the ones I agree with, right? Medicaid, Medicare, Great Society, New Deal programming, even those, when they're actually pushed out, there's usually some massive flaw in their implementation because the policymakers aren't able to deal with human diversity. They're not able to deal with the fact that Alabama is completely different from Alaska. It's like, you have these people in government settings that think that knowledge is replicable and that you can just apply it willy-nilly all over the place. And the reality is like, it's not. Our ecosystems are diverse, our cultures are diverse. And I think what Native people have had to grapple with and deal with, since forever, is how do we coexist in such diversity, right? How do we like come together and, joke around with each other? And how do we defend, sort of our territorial borders when we need to? Like, this is what we learned through the millennia of living in this continent, you know, in North and South America. And so I just want to say, like, immediately I began to feel almost upset, or like I started to try to game, like, okay, well, how am I going to make like these three white folks understand that what Indigenous communities know is not just valuable, it is essential, right?
Regional knowledge. Yeah.
Right. And so I would just say, you know, and I know like policymakers have almost no patience for this type of thing. You need to flip the question. You need to flip the lens and the framing of the question so that, you know, it recognizes the fact that every Indigenous community in the United States of America, pretty much around the world as well, has a set of practices, knowledges that are essential for understanding that landscape. And if you need a white person to confirm this, Mike Davis has a really great book called Late Victorian Holocausts. And it's basically about the chaos, the environmental and economic chaos wrought by colonialism, not just in the Americas, but in, you know, India, throughout Africa. And he shows how when capitalist sort of extraction came into all of these colonial environments, they radically shifted the way that local societies had been dealing with water, with land, what was planted on the land. And then that, you know, resulted in basically famine and like natural disasters. Because the land wasn't being used the same way. So I would encourage you to read the Victorian Holocaust.
Let me just comment, the last group felt very much the same, that the question had problems and really was not framed well. So I really appreciate hearing that from you, that, you know, we're learning, and that's really why we're here, and you're being inform us that helps them. We do thank you.
Ask what this data is going to be used for.
Okay, so there will be a report for the Environmental Protection Agency looking at the tool of cumulative impact assessment. That tool is used in policy settings. So as a report, it helps inform where things go, but the directly from this to that is many different steps. So it's trying to get enough information from enough sources to make it a useful document for policy settings. Is that fair?
That's beneficial for who?
For policies that will affect the whole country. Do you want to word it differently? I mean, this.
Well, so the report will be, so the report is about improving methods for cumulative impact assessment, which is a policy tool that's done for lots of different purposes. And so it's like Wei Shui was describing at the beginning of the meeting, and you're thinking about the stressors broadly and how stressors impact health.
And our hope, if I may,
yeah.
So our hope, you know, obviously these are funny times.
Yeah.
And you know, the EPA, the step forward previously, was that they started really thinking we have to incorporate this in how we do the science around understanding what we're doing to the environment and how that's affecting health. They haven't gotten to the point of figuring out, well, how do we put this in practice? They're still kind of struggling with, and we all are, like, how do you even do the science right so that it provides these answers? So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Liz, but I think this report is sort of all of us from our different backgrounds and experiences trying to put it in a way that is usable for general policymakers or even like nonprofits or groups that want to push